Hey friends, thank you for sticking around with me. I know it's been a long time coming for my molds, but I finally launched them, and thanks to you guys made it possible. This tutorial is going to be for Jason. It's the same process for all of my molds. You can use polymer clay or air dry clay. For this tutorial, I did use air dry because my hands were just not in the mood to be conditioning polymer clay for about an hour. If you know, you know. But again, this is the same process for all of my molds. Sit back and enjoy the process. And thank you guys again for making my dreams come true. Mwah. All right, let's get into it. At the beginning of the video, you see me roll out a ball of air dry clay with this chingadera over there. Use it for tortillas. And this allows the clay to be flat and smooth so that it gives a better impression. I've in the past used chunks at a time and pressed it into the mold. It does come back out of the mold with a bunch of little separation lines. So rolling it out was a tip from my quality control team. Shout out to Kelly and Christina from Burns Boutique and the Cupsmith. Now that the center of the mold is filled in, you want to get some clay and fill in the sections that the clay did not reach originally. Make sure you're pressing the clay in very hard in these sections because you don't want any separation lines. If there are, it's okay. You can always smooth it out with some water after. Once your mold is completely covered with clay, you want to smooth out the surface because the cup that the clay is going on is flat and it's curved. So if you lay a lumpy, bumpy mold on top of it, it's not going to be even. You're going to get air bubbles. It could crack. So you want to make sure that everything is level. I always do a little bit of extra pushing of the clay into the mold just so you get a really good impression of the character. Okay, now we're at the most satisfying part of the process, removing your sculpt from the mold. I always recommend pushing the center down and then releasing one side at a time, very slowly. With air dry clay, it's a little easier to mess up the sculpt because it's a little more pliable than polymer. Polymer is a little stiffer, stiff, but it's not gonna, the impression's not gonna mess up as easy as air dry clay. When using any mold with clay, you will get imperfections. So just be aware that eventually you're gonna have to smooth those out if you don't want those there. When you're ready to place your mold onto the cup, especially with air dry clay, you don't do this with polymer. You put a little bit of warm water onto the back of the actual sculpt, and then you place it onto the cup. You don't want to put too much water because your cup will be too slippery and you don't want your mold slipping and sliding around. Once your sculpt is positioned on the cup, you want to press down the edges. This helps the air dry clay adhere to the cup a lot easier because as it dries, it's going to shrink a little bit and it will lift or it will crack. And you don't want it lifting too much because then you're going to have to go in and put some E6000 just so that it fills in those lifted areas. You don't want air bubbles with your epoxy either, so that helps as well. I like to go around the edges of the clay and kind of press it into the cup. So again, to prevent any air bubbles or anything lifting. The final part of any sculpting is to make sure that you smooth out any imperfections, especially if you're selling your products. If you're selling these on cups, if you're making 3D cups, you want to make sure you're giving quality work. So smoothing out imperfections, making things look very presentable is important. With air dry clay, all you need is a little bit of water, just smooth things out. I don't typically sculpt with gloves, but I didn't want to get my hands dirty on camera because it gets really crusty with air dry clay and it's not the business. So with the bare hand, you want to go ahead and smooth out any of the lines, anything that you don't want there. In this case, the little circle on the mask, I guess it's a button, it was kind of smushed, and that's my fault because of how I released it from the mold. Usually, but a sculpting tool will fix that for me. Now for those of you that are using polymer clay, if you need to smooth out any imperfections, you could either use a ball tool or you can use a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed my professional YouTube tutorial on how to use my molds. Again, this process is for air dry clay or polymer clay, and you can do this process, all these tips and tricks, with any of my molds. Have a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comments, questions, concerns, drop them in the comments. Bye.